Evolution.org Underground Supplements, episode 27 coming your way. Hard to believe we're already up to episode 27 on this. And this is going to be an important one. And this is going to be one that could literally change your life, save you money, save you headaches in the future. And the topic is, can grapefruit and black pepper make supplements stronger? So we're going to get into this one, why athletes are looking to boost what they're taking, how grapefruit and black pepper boost supplements. We're going to really dive under the hood. And Mobster and I are going to get into the science behind how this actually works, because it's very fascinating. When I was researching this and when Mobster was researching this, how it actually happens. Because a lot of people think it's bro science or it's a myth, and it's not. And we're going to get into that specifically. We're also going to get into N2Guard and N2BM and what ingredients they have in their products and the N2BM story. But first, let me remind everybody, we are on Apple, we are on Spotify, we're on different platforms out there. If you want to help us out and have this podcast continue, you've got to help us by smashing the like button every chance you get, by subscribing every chance you get on as many platforms as possible. Listening also helps, obviously, gets our view count up. We've got about 50 to 100,000 views within the first month of our podcast coming out on all platforms. We want to push that up to 500,000 or even a million eventually. So help us out and get this going. We're the only podcast out there talking about this stuff. We're the only podcast out there that has our stuff actually vetted by actual doctors before it gets published. So we make sure that we are accurate and factual with our information. The other podcasts, they don't do any of that. They just sit around, blab for an hour about stuff, and there's no fact checking, no nothing. We actually do that. And we will not publish this unless it is correct, and we will not get this show started unless we are prepared properly. So that's how we roll on this podcast. So if you like that and you want to keep this going, you've got to help us out. Otherwise, we'll be gone and it'll be all crappy podcasts out there. So let's get into it. Why do athletes look to boost what they're taking? Mobster, you've had a history with supplement companies. You've had a
Yep.
history using these products. Explain this one in layman terms.
Yeah. So, look, look, kind of start with the foundational stuff here, Steve. There's a thought process. My company, when I had a company, we were very basic and we weren't looking to change the world in terms of the latest product or whatever else. What we were looking to do was buy the ton, hopefully at some point, which we didn't get to, buy the 10 tons and 100 tons, and literally, and this is the model that's worked for companies that were around at the same time and have gone on to be successful. You have the biggest buying power in the industry, and because you've got the biggest buying power, you get the best price, and you pass those savings on to your customers. And the volume approach generates income, generates profit. Other companies, and I can think of a couple, including the one that we're going to talk about later on, they are looking not to buy 10, 50, 100 tons of whey protein powder and sell it in 10, 15, 20 kilogram, 20, 30, 40 pound amounts. They're looking for a product that doesn't exist in the marketplace, or looking for a gap in the marketplace, or specifically, as per the topic of this particular section of the show, they're looking to give customers an edge. So for the longest time, and we see some history referencing this, there's an idea sometimes that certain athletes have an advantage, or this particular person has great genetics, or this particular person, they live on a farm, or that particular person, where they live is only fresh air and where they live it's not. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes there is an edge for that person. And it might be their background, it might be their upbringing, it might literally be just how well they absorb certain particular things. And again, that's a genetic argument. Some of what we also do when it comes to bodybuilding is occasionally, and we've talked about one or two people that used to do this kind of research for roundtable discussions and whatever else, is that there are people that, and they might not even be the best bodybuilders, Steve, but they are the best to go to research libraries at the big universities and sit down and look at the chemistry books, look at the books that talk about the creation of steroids, for example. We've talked about the molecular, moving around esters and carbon atoms on steroids, and this method changes the testosterone to a propanol, to an ACE, to an anamphate, and so on and so forth. And sometimes they will find something it helps if you know what you're looking for, you have an idea what's going on. But sometimes it was random, Steve, and they would come across something to go, hang on, could we apply, and this is just the researcher side, could we apply that to the use of testosterone? Could we apply that idea to how we train? Arthur Jones was a great theorist, not necessarily practical, not necessarily science based, but some of it was, and it kind of sounded like it. And what you're also looking for, and let's be honest, Steve, this is a human failing, as well as one of the things that makes us as a species incredibly successful, is we are inherently, arguably, lazy. And the reason, and yet at the same time, we create tools which requires us to put some effort in to do things that make life easier. So the dial-up telephone, dial-up internet versus you and I with iPhones and Android phones and 20 megapixel cameras on our phones and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, it might be $1,000, but my God, you've got the equivalent of 40 tools in your pocket. When we're looking for supplements, we're looking sometimes for something that does everything. Might be a little bit expensive, but how much more expensive would be if we bought all these ingredients individually and so on and so forth. So we look for an edge. It might be how we train. It might be how we eat. It might be how we use performance-enhancing drugs, and it might be how we use supplements. So that's just human nature for the most part. Now, I would argue that you might be okay to look for an edge in training, but you still have to train your ass off. Might be okay to look for an edge in nutrition, but you still have to be, the best results come from eating the cleanest diet. But when it comes to supplements, and this is where Steve was talking about the science stuff, and I will also touch on steroids because that's kind of what inspired this show to begin with. When it comes to supplements, there are certain fantastic supplements, certain fantastic ingredients that use in supplements. Turmeric is an obvious example, which the science shows have certain beneficial effects, but the science also shows, and this is where Steve and I went away and did the research, that our body doesn't like to digest, or it does, but it digests it and excretes it very, very quickly. And so you lose some of the benefits. Turmeric is great for this, turmeric is great for that, but the body metabolizes it and excretes it so quickly. What can we do to either make it more available, or what can we do to slow down the digestion? Now, there's a back and forth on the argument against Steve when it comes to why does the body not like it? Why is it producing these enzymes that break it down? Is there a side effect here? Is there a benefit? Is there not a benefit? And some of it is, as an example, Steve, that some of the things that we're talking about today, for example, the issue with grapefruit, is that the specific part of the grapefruit that helps us with bioavailability doesn't taste very nice at all. It's the part, arguably, Steve, that makes the grapefruit bitter, and specifically the red ruby grapefruit. It makes it very, very bitter, and your body just goes, that to me is kind of toxic. That's a poison. There's a reason why it tastes so horrible. Therefore, if the human ingest it, I'm going to do, it's not going to kill me, because obviously we'd have found out a long time ago, but I want to get it out of my body because it's going to irritate the gut or whatever else. And yet, ironically, if you actually take the extract from that grapefruit and you use it, it's actually boosting, as we're talking about here today, specific supplements. And then the argument, which we're going to touch upon now, regarding steroids. So the people can always look for an edge when it comes to PEDs. PEDs, steroids, and other drugs are arguably an edge. They give you an edge over someone who's not using them. So we'll go back to that point I made earlier on. So let's talk about steroids specifically. What inspired today's show, to some small degree, but took us in a little bit more of a supplemental direction, was the idea behind using, and this is just for the grapefruit part of the show, grapefruit or an extract from the grapefruit to boost the anabolic effect of oral steroids. So I go, like Steve says, away and we do a little bit of research. We say, okay, is this actually the case? And there was there was a couple of decent videos, Steve. One specifically on the black pepper extract that I looked at, one specifically on the active part of the grapefruit, which boosts the idea of bioavailability specifically of supplements and also certain medications. We'll touch upon that as well. But let's talk about briefly the oral steroid thing. So, such as it is, and I'm referring to a would-be guru online who's actually got a decent clientele base and had the advantage of being able to look at the blood test results of his athletes. They reference the idea that golden age, let's talk about Arnold Schwarzenegger's era of bodybuilding in the late 60s, mid 70s, and right up to maybe just around 1980, were quote unquote using grapefruit to boost the bioavailability of the oral steroids. So I'll go, okay, that means it's not a new idea. And he actually says that. He then goes on to talk about his blood tests of his clients. And he said specifically, and this was the thing that was interesting for me. He said that, and I actually thought Proviron and Masteron would probably do a better job. What was available to the athlete versus their actual testosterone levels. And the actual testosterone levels will boost, in his words, and I quote, a small to slight amount. So my argument was always going to be, I've seen the words might and I've seen the words may, but the bottom line has to be, are they leaner? Are they more muscular? Do they have a bigger arm? Do they have a better bench press? And so on and so forth. And for example, as a measure, is there a significant, and you and I have actually talked about this on other shows recently, when we talked about something like 2 or 3% increase, scientifically speaking, that is significant, but in real terms, it is not. So you and I were talking about semaglutide and other products of the same in the same family, and we was talking about numbers like 20.9, 28%, 15, 18, 19%, and so on and so forth with different dosages. Those are beyond significant. Imagine, for example, taking Anavar, Steve, and getting a 15 to 20% boost versus a 1, 2, or 3% boost. So in my mind, the argument for me then become, I can't see, I don't want to see the words might, I don't want to see the words may, I want to see scientific data, hence us doing the research for these shows. I want to see not 1 to 2% being quoted as significantly scientific, and a statistical number that in scientific terms is good. I want to see real terms. No one is going to spend that money or eat that many grapefruits or half a grapefruit or a quarter of a grapefruit, Steve, for a 1 kilo increase, a 2.2 pound increase on their bench press, or an eighth of an inch on their bicep or their chest, Steve. We want big numbers. So from my perspective, scientifically speaking, real terms, etc., 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 the idea might work, but there's no proper evidence and no statistical number that we can grab hold of in a real meaningful way. Now, that doesn't mean that you can throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to supplements, because again, there are certain ingredients in certain products, and we're going to talk about a product like that today, where the benefits of some of those supplemental ingredients are very well known, have been researched multiple times, have been peer reviewed, and in real world practical terms have huge, like I said earlier on, Steve, with the turmeric, huge feedback by millions of users across the world saying this particular ingredient made my swelling go down. This particular ingredient had a fantastic anti-inflammatory effect. This particular ingredient decreased my blood pressure by a significant number. And if we can talk about that, we go, that starts to be real world useful. And when it comes to the boosting effects of both grapefruit extract and specifically black pepper extract in supplements, there are real world numbers, real world applications, and real world uses. And that to me makes a lot more sense. So the oral steroid might drop into and I'll touch on this now, Steve, the medication side. And this is that red flag warning part of the show. It is well known, and I say that because we know, because we've looked, and obviously we've done a little bit of research, and anybody that's looked at this for 5 minutes will turn around and tell you the same thing. And it comes on pretty much every show, every article that I looked at, both in the past and today for this show and yesterday for this show. Right. So certain medications, and there's a long list, and I'm not even going to try to read the list on the show, Steve. You must be, if you are on certain medications, listeners, made aware either by your own research or by the wax insert that comes with those medications. And they quite often you should be asked, not always asked, but you should be asked, and you should be aware that if you decide to use these extracts, they can affect in a negative way certain medications that you're on. They can make some medications more potent, which is useful, but as many times as often, the warning is you are taking a certain amount of this medication. There's only a certain amount which is bioavailable. Sometimes increasing that bioavailability can actually act against you. So, for example, we know that certain medications have side effects, and that's dose related. It's very individual for certain people. It might be 1 in 1,000, might be 1 in 10,000, but you wouldn't necessarily want to increase in certain medications that bioavailability without being aware that you might have a potential for side effects. Now, as I said, that list is quite long. It does include, and I actually argued this when I was writing this down for the show, Steve, in a positive way, one of the medications, or should I say family of medications that it does include the bioavailability of is PDE5s, which is basically all your erectile dysfunction drugs. That's not necessarily a good thing all the time. So, for example, some users Viagra get blurred vision, a tinted vision, you get red faced on certain medications like those products. And I've even heard of people, and I think I had this once myself at the very first time I used it, a headache. So the idea that you would have a worse headache or worse blurred vision and so on and so forth. Now that effect doesn't last and it doesn't continue from more frequent use. But again, it's one of those things. Am I using heart medications? Am I on statins? And so on and so forth. So make sure, listener, if you are doing it, and I bring Steve in now to go and look at that list. What do you think on that, Steve?
Yeah, and to sum up this topic, look, everybody's looking for an edge, and life is too short to sit around and ignore that fact. You're listening to this podcast because you want to get an edge. You listen to all our podcasts. You come on the forums because you want to get that edge. I've seen so many people over the years waste their money on cheap supplements. You know, go to the supplement, go to a retail store. Most of the supplements on the shelves are going to be poor quality. You take a cheap vitamin from a retail place, for example, it's going to be mostly crap. You really think you look at that vitamin, it's got 150% of your daily intake, 100% of your daily intake, 200% of your daily intake. Do you really think if you take that vitamin every day and you eat nothing but cookies, ice cream, and pizza and drink Coke, drink soda, you really think that those vitamins are going to save you? They're not. What's going to end up happening is you're going to mostly pee them out. You're going to excrete them out. They're not getting absorbed in your body. Your body's not able to utilize them in your body properly. So just because you take a vitamin every day and you're like, oh, let me just skip my fruits and vegetables. I don't need these vitamins and minerals. It doesn't work like that. And we're going to talk about this exactly because in the world of foods, the way that we have evolved and the way that cats have evolved and every other animal is different. Cats, they go and they have to eat a certain diet or they will die. Their kidneys will start failing. They will die. Humans are different. We can get away with a lot of different foods out there, but we need specific foods to really keep us going and keep us healthy. And we need those antioxidants to keep us healthy. So why is it important to be aware of the certain foods that affect us? As Momster said, what happens if I take Viagra and then I take something that really makes it more bioavailable and I suffer from headaches or I suffer from, my erection doesn't go away for hours and hours and hours because I took the wrong food with it. You can end up in the hospital. You can end up getting your dick chopped off. There's a lot of bad things that come. So it's being aware of the different things that boost your supplements and boost the oral drugs that you're taking is going to be a weapon that you're going to have in life. This is why this is such an important podcast that we're doing. So let's get into how grapefruit boosts supplements, Mobster. And then we talk about grapefruit juice. And remember, let me just reiterate this. when you go to the supermarket and you get grapefruit juice off the shelf, a lot of times they add sugar to it, they add water to it, they add it's processed, flash processed or whatever. So you got to make sure if you're going to do this the right way that you are
See,
taking, yeah,
yeah, just on grapefruit, and this actually came from the research, they actually treat the grapefruit to make it less bitter, and it's the bitter part of the grapefruit that's actually
yes,
going to give you that boost. So keep that in mind, listeners. You're better off squeezing a grapefruit yourself or buying a
yes.
grapefruit than you are grapefruit juice.
If you go to a health food store, a lot of health food stores, they'll squeeze it and then they'll put it on the shelf non pasteurized. And it'll last on that shelf for a day or 2 days. Then they'll pull it off the shelf because it's not going to be good after 2 days. So basically, you want to keep that in mind. So if you go to the gas station and get a little bottle of grapefruit juice, it's not going to be good quality because it's been sitting there for like a month, in the fridge there. So it's not going to be the actual grapefruit. So you got to keep that in mind, obviously. So this is how it works. And grapefruit will inhibit something called CYP3A4 in our stomach. And CYP3A4 works by metabolizing drugs we put in our bodies. So when you're taking the grapefruit juice, it will block this action and it'll allow more potency of what you're taking to enter your bloodstream. So specifically, it does this thanks to something that it contains in that, which is called furanocoumarin chemical. And furanocoumarin is a natural compound that is found in different plants, especially grapefruit. And it turns out that parsley and parsnip, which kind of looks like a carrot, parsnip, has the highest concentrations of furanocoumarin. And other fruits, also like limes and bitter orange, also contain a large amount. So you can also, you not necessarily, if let's say some of you out there, you don't like grapefruit, maybe it bothers your tongue. I know with me, if I drink grapefruit juice, it like swells up my mouth and it bothers my tongue a lot. So if you're not into grapefruit, you can also take advantage of parsley. Parsley is a really good herb. I don't know if any of you have ever tried it before, but you could chop up parsley, and I like to add it to my burgers, and I'll mix the burger meat, the beef, with the parsley, and I'll have the parsley actually within the burger. And parsley has a lot of health benefits besides this out there. So, and it's something that you can add to just about anything, and you can actually grow it. It's pretty easy to grow. It does die. It needs a lot of water, needs a lot of babying. It does die pretty easily, but you can actually grow parsley from seeds if you want, and you can just basically continue cycling it constantly. Have different pots and cycle the parsley because it will grow and then die, grow and then die. So you got to keep it doesn't just stay alive for a long period of time. But it's actually a really good thing you can add to just pretty much every meal, and it has a lot of that furanocoumarin in it, and it has a lot of other health benefits. So this is how it works, and this is legit. This isn't just something some bro scientist came up with online. This is actual science about how it works, and we've seen, as Mobster said, we've seen the numbers when people have been taking different drugs. Like Viagra, for example, they'll take Viagra and then have some of these ingredients, this CYP3A4 foods with it, and that will give them a more of a boost. So if you're taking 25 milligrams or 50 milligrams of Viagra and you take some this with it, maybe drink it with some grapefruit juice, some raw grapefruit juice, or squeeze your own grapefruit, as Mobster said, or bitter orange or lime, add a touch of lime to it, you'll have actually it'll increase its potency by a certain percentage. That percentage can range from anywhere from 5% to 25% or even more. It just depends on how much you're taking. Mobster?
One of the medications that I use on a regular basis, Steve, requires you to take a certain milligram total, but only gives you, I think it's about 75% of the product as an active ingredient in your system. And I'm thinking specifically glucosamine sulfate here, Steve, for joint products. I believe, as I said, I think it's something along the lines of, and don't quote me, listeners, 2,000 milligrams per day ingested for 1,500 milligram portion, so 75% of that, as the part that's actually going to help your joints and help your connective tissue. So you go, would certain products, without these extracts, you'd require a lot more of the product, or without these extracts, you'd require more frequent ingestion, and so on. The whole bioavailability thing, just to explain it, and again, it's very simple terms. I'm not going to pretend to be any kind of expert in this particular area, is arguably, Steve, about making more of what you have ingested available to you at that time. And even then, I've argued about what I call having something more available is not necessarily meaning greater uptake. So your body will take what it needs, but you're still getting the maximum from that product. When we talk about metabolizing or metabolization, arguably, Steve, it's the literal fuel going into an engine and how much of that fuel is available to you as energy to make the car go forward or to power the car versus how much is wasted, and specifically how quickly it's wasted. So, for example, slowing down that process of being broken down and wasted means more is available to you at a given time, and so on. So, for example, I mean, we know that certain products, certain supplements, certain steroids for that matter, Steve, require, and we talk about half-lives, of course, on these shows, require you to take multiple times per day. A good example would be an oral steroid with a half-life of 8 hours. So ideally, you're looking for one, and this happens even with over-the-counter medications and prescribed medications. It will say one whip per meal 3 times a day. And that's the reason for being available through the whole 24 hours. Versus, I think Steve talked about on other shows, the nighttime formula of certain products, and it'll be an 18-hour half-life, meaning you take one before you go to bed, and you won't need to take the next one till lunchtime the following day, and so on and so forth. So when it comes to some of these things, the ability to boost the availability of certain products means you're not having to take thousands and thousands of milligrams just to get 1,000 milligram extracts. I'll use the glucosamine again, Steve. If it was only 15 or 20% available, I'd have to take 4 or 5 grams just to get the same amount that I do from 2 grams. So that's just a way of looking at these things as well. And again, look at when we talk about, and I use the joint product as an example again, Steve. Some of us have fantastic diets. Most people do not. Those of us that train, like Steve said, that are looking for an edge are also more likely to have shoulder issues and elbow issues and joint issues from literally just pounding the weights. So anything that helps us reduce the inflammation, reduce the soreness would be fantastic. And glucosamine's awesome for that. But at the same time, the idea that I might have to take, Steve, 3 servings of 2 pills or 4 pills per day through the day constantly is a huge pain in the ass. I mean, I think we're always looking for, and this is, I'll say this slightly tongue in cheek when we talk about these kind of shows, we're almost looking for the good kryptonite versus the bad kryptonite. So we want, and not only that, also, Steve, when we talk about, as we will do specifically on a product later on, I've talked about the availability of certain ingredients at certain periods of the year and where these extracts come from, and so on and so forth. And when we get into the specific product, this becomes super important. I even just got referencing back to the supplement industry again, Steve. I have seen companies that quote unquote found something, patent a version. They've gone to a university, they've asked for this supplement to be made only in this kind of form, and then they've been able to go to the FDA or whoever in the States and register that form as being the best form, and then license it so that only they can sell it to you in that form. And any other company that has a similar version of a similar product that hasn't been shown to be as effective in a study cannot claim that they're using the same form. So to talk about that, within the supplement industry, the amount of money that can be made, and I'm not just talking about bodybuilders and listeners of this show, I'm talking about the mass market use of supplements and certain particular products. As an example, Steve, I think 1 or 2 forms of creatine had these kind of trademarked and patented versions that were available. And obviously, the idea then became that us bodybuilders, us people that lift weights and go to the gym, we're looking for an edge. Go, well, if it's got this patent, if it's licensed, if only this form is available, it must be the absolute nuts. It must be the be all and end all. Is it worth an extra $5, $10, $15 of my money? And people went a bit crazy very, very briefly before they ended up, in that example, going back to creatine monohydrate because it was cheap, because it was effective. And as even if the patented version was 5 or 10% better, you had to spend so much more to buy it. You had to use that much more. It wasn't just worth the effort to just maybe add an extra few grams to your creatine monohydrate and get the same amount for $5 or less a day. So yeah, the whole thing when it comes to this stuff, what you're really looking for, and again, when we talk about this product later on, Steve, you're really, really looking for, as per the issue here, products that make it worthwhile. I wouldn't, for example, be looking to add some sort of grapefruit extract or black pepper extract to every single tablet or every single product that I'm taking. Because sometimes, like Steve talked about the vitamins earlier on, they're so fucking cheap, Steve, that a general Walmart, Tesco as the version that's going to cost me $4 or $5, the super duper fantastically expensive version can't arguably be that much more effective. And therefore, it's not necessarily worth going for something that costs 3 or 4 times as much when then there's no difference. But when it comes to the kind of supplements that we're talking about, and specifically the kind of supplements that bodybuilders are using, we're looking for the effect. What are we looking for, Steve? We're looking for, as we're going to talk about, the best organ protector in the market, the best testosterone booster in the market. We want products that, if they're not drug-like in their effects, certainly allow us to use actual drugs and minimize as much as possible the effects, well, side effects, the bad effects of those drugs. And at the same time, specifically when it comes to grapefruit juice extracts and black pepper extracts, if possible, boost the anabolic effect of those drugs. So you're kind of looking, one of the things that we talk about, and I've used this analogy a bunch of times on these shows, is thinking of your body as a sports car. And we could put the best tires on, have the best mechanic service in the engine. Would we then put a cheap oil in? No, we should use an oil that specifically suits that car with the fuel that we're using. And so that aspect gets the absolute best performance out of that car. And that's how we should treat our bodies. Talk about black pepper as well, Steve.
So next one we're going to talk about is black pepper. And it's also a great way to help with supplement absorption. And that's thanks to its active compound called piperin or piperin. There's a couple different ways to pronounce it. I've heard piperin and I've heard piperin. So I prefer piperin. It's just like a lot easier to say it. And what piperin does is it inhibits enzymes in the intestines and liver that break down and eliminate nutrients, which helps boost bioavailability of what you're taking. So when this happens, more of the supplement or the drug will enter the bloodstream without interference, thus creating a natural boost in the amount that you're taking. Another way that it works is by increasing blood flow to the gastrointestinal tract, and it helps transport nutrients easier along with interacting with the intestinal membrane, altering its permeability. And finally, it also helps by slowing down the breakdown process so that more of the supplement you take is actually implemented. Just like I said earlier, if you take a vitamin that is just a bunch of vitamins they put together and you take it, how much of that is actually getting absorbed? Very, very little. Some of it's getting absorbed, but a lot of it is just getting spit out by the body and not even being taken advantage of. So basically, you're wasting your money and you're wasting your time. This is why many supplements that contain a lot of ingredients together will also contain piperin as a final ingredient. So if you take 20 supplements together, for example, you aren't taking piperin, you're probably not going to be happy with what you get out of it. And a lot of you out there, you'll go to the supplement shop, you'll pick out, a bunch of supplements off the shelf. Each of the supplements you pick off the shelf have like 5, 6 ingredients or 10 ingredients. And then, so you're taking like 100 different ingredients and you're just throwing them at your body. Are you really getting anything out of them? Mostly no. If it's not going to get absorbed, then you're not getting what you need out of it. So you see why now the supplement industry gets such a bad rap when it comes to what they're doing. A lot of people are so disappointed when they take supplements. How many people are deficient in different vitamins and minerals? They'll take a multivitamin and then they'll get tested again and they'll still be deficient. And they're like, what am I doing wrong here? I thought I'd fix it by just taking more of something. Well, unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. So take a look at the supplements that you have. They've got a lot of ingredients and it's not working for you. That's probably why. It's probably because you're not taking what you need with it. You're not taking the piperin, you're not taking the grapefruit juice or the parsley with it, and you're not getting that absorption. So a good supplement is going to contain piperin. We're going to get into in a second N2Guard and how piperin is one of the ingredients of N2Guard and explain exactly how that works. But first, Mobster, bring in Mobster. Talk a little bit more about black pepper if you have anything else you want to add.
Yeah, as Steve was talking just now, it occurred to me something that we've touched upon briefly on other shows, Steve. So, for example, the ability, Steve talked about blood flow. So I was thinking, right, you need to boost the digestive process. You need to, and we talked about uh, pineapple, for example, with bromelain, Steve, increasing your ability to digest protein. We need, when we're taking some of these supplements, we need the body to be able to break them down in the gut. That increased blood flow going to the side, to the wall of the stomach, to the stomach lining, and pulling as the ingredients, the active part of the supplement in this example goes over, more blood's available to flush it around the body. So that's got to be a thing. Something that I've talked about, again, this is what I've touched upon on other shows, Steve, was from time to time, and perhaps might be something for a future podcast or a little bit more research. And I've seen it mentioned that one of the things that will be studied now in the next few years, it's actually something you and I have touched upon indirectly, is gut health specifically. And I wrote down the word macrobiome. So the idea of the poor food that an enormous amount of people, especially in the first world, with poor food quality, we lose in some of our gut health, i.e., natural bacteria that exist, natural flora and fauna that exist in our gut that actually enable in nature normally us to be able to digest and as a species survive various foods from different times, different locations, and so on. It makes us omnivores. It means we can eat vegetable and meat and so on and so forth. Basically, human beings can eat lots of things that animals, cats, like Steve referred to at the beginning of the show, cannot. And it means that we are able to travel around the world and eat different foods in different places and survive as a species. Now, part of the problem in the first world is arguably, Steve, we're losing that. We become more food sensitive. We have more food allergies and so on and so forth. And that's because some of our gut health is really bad. So anything that improves gut health is going to be good. Anything that boosts the ability for the body to digest, in this example, would be good. And the last one is arguably digestive stress. And I thought of that specifically here, Steve, both with, again, the grapefruit and the black pepper extracts, is because as bodybuilders, what do we sometimes, I say bodybuilders because that's the majority of our listeners, but weight trained athletes, losing weight, getting stronger, more muscular, and so on and so forth. What do? We sometimes really push our kind of way that we digest food, Steve. We either do super simplistic diets, so we do lose some of those macronutrients and the digestive ability to not lose food away. We eat, and I'll bring Steve in for this as well, fantastic amounts of protein, sometimes to excess. We will focus, and this happens a lot in the dietary world, Steve, people trying to lose weight, Weight Watchers and so on. We become fixated on just a very small amount of food. And I mean, the range, we know, for example, Steve and I'll bring Steve in for this as well, organic is better than frozen. Local source product is better than products from halfway across the world. The macronutrients of fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, fresh meat is better than stuff that's been frozen or processed or mixed with other products and so on and so forth. Arguably, Steve, it's kind of ironic, and this includes, again, in the first world, we have a greater availability of rare fruits, exotic meats, and so on. And so I think I've eaten crocodile, I believe I've eaten zebra, ostrich, I know that I've eaten. And again, this is because not only have they produced in this country in very small amounts, but it can be imported via container ship and frozen and brought to this country. The same thing with certain fruits from around the world, as well as, again, produced in this country. And so, ironically, we have a greater availability in the first world to certain foods, but at the same time, our gut health's become poorer. And again, in bodybuilding, what are we doing? We're stressing our bodies with weightlifting. We're stressing our bodies arguably sometimes when we're doing the super restrictive cutting diets or bulking. We're pushing our digestive stress. So anything in that situation that enables us to be healthier or better, healthier, while we're doing that stressful situation, while we're doing some of those things to our body, is useful. So, what do you think about that, especially the digestion and the way that we can fuck it up a little bit, and in modern terms for everybody as well as athletes?
Yeah, and it's a domino effect. A lot of people have digestive issues, are metabolically sick, um, and you know, it's one of those things where we talked about on the previous shows, Mobster. A lot of that may not be your fault. I mean, unfortunately, we grow up, we're given what our parents give us. There's a story of the dog. These people, they find the dog, they bring the dog home, and they feed the dog something that upsets the dog's stomach, or they give them the dog food from the store. Most of the dog food in the store is garbage. I would never feed a dog that. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's abuse. These foods that they sell in the store, and the dog gets sick. The dog has diarrhea all over the carpet, and then they put the dog's nose in the diarrhea and hit it. Bad dog, you diarrhea in the carpet. And the dog looks at them like, "What did I do wrong?" It's not the dog's fault. It's that the owner is giving the dog something that upsets the dog's stomach. You would think that they have common sense enough to know that that's not what the dog is has evolved to consume. So it's the same thing with us. We grow up eating a lot of these bad foods, and then as adults we end up with a lot of these health problems because of the food we've eaten. So now as an adult, you've got the ability to make the correct decisions on what you can eat. And if you don't, you keep throwing junk at your body over and over, and you're not eliminating things that upset your stomach all the time, you're just stressing out your gut even more. And that's going to inhibit your muscle gains. That's going to inhibit the strength gains that you have. And that's going to be a big detriment. I mean, look, if you go to the gym after eating something that upsets your stomach and you're, you know, farting the whole time and you've got cramps the whole time, you got to take a dump the whole time, how are you
Yeah,
supposed to get in a good workout? It just doesn't make any sense. So it's very important to nail down what you're putting in your body. And it's important to understand that everybody's different. Everybody's different. You've got to find what foods you like. There's no such thing as copy paste dieting where I can copy paste like these gurus out there. I have the least amount of respect for all these gurus out there that copy and paste the same fucking diets to people and sell them for $400 or $500 because they have a million Instagram followers, and they copy paste the same diet to everybody they talk to, because that's not how it works. Everybody is going to be different. It's going to have a lot to do with the past foods you've eaten. It has to do with your genetics. It has to do with your history, what medications you're taking, what supplements you're taking. All this stuff factors in. Some of you aren't going to be able to consume garlic and onions. Some of you aren't going to be able to consume red meat. Some of you aren't going to be able to consume fruits and vegetables, high fiber diets. Some of you aren't going to be able to consume oily foods that are high in oil. Some of you aren't going to be able to consume high fats. Everybody's going to be different. So you've got to mold your diet to what works for you. Otherwise, your gut won't be able to absorb shit. So you want to talk about that a little bit, Monster?
yeah.
Let's
Let
get
me
into
give you some
Entogard a little bit. Yeah.
examples. Right, this is a bit of a rant, both myself and Steve. It has to be said. I've done analogies like this before. I make my own ice cream, Steve. And there's a couple of decent companies, one specifically, which I won't name on the show, well known in the Welsh Valleys where I live. And they make some great ice cream. They also make sorbets, and sorbet is actually, Steve, is water ice. I think that's the actual literal translation. And you can have lemon water ice and blackcurrant water ice and so on and so forth. And there's normally a little bit of something added in there to help boost the flavour and keep it in a sort of gel sorbet-like state. But that basically, if you made it yourself at home, listens, I think it's like 5 or 6 ingredients. The specific company in question has a couple of sorbet products on their list. and I brought one or two, and then I never brought it again. I think I just wanted to see what they did because is it as good as their ice cream? And then one of the things that caught my eye was the fact that their sorbet product was, I think, 17 or 19 ingredients, Steve. So you go, how is it if you made it at home for a dinner party for your guests, it'd be 5 or 6 ingredients, maybe less if it was really simple, versus 18 or 19. It was just fucking shit. Okay. My own ice cream, if I make my own ice cream, I'll give you an example. One of these things I have every other night as a little treat, Steve, is some sort of shortcake type thing with like a white chocolate on top. And I think there's some sort of toffee like stuff in between, caramel or whatever it was. And on the front, it says this particular baker, which is bullshit. It's actually a shop brand. They just label certain products within that shop, and they carefully selected the ingredients, it says. And then when you turn it over, there's 40 carefully selected ingredients for the flour, for the sugar, for this, for that, for the other. The classic one with processed food in this day and age, Steve, which causes problems with, funny enough, in the Welsh Valleys here, Steve, with quote unquote ready meals, is glucose syrup, which is added to sweeten low grade cuts of meat, low grade cuts of vegetables in ready meals. So, in other words, it makes poor meat taste nicer, makes poor vegetables taste nicer. And of course, it allows for these things to be sat on the shelf for longer. So, yeah. And even as a touch upon just finishing on this point, Steve, that you mentioned a little bit about the background. My mum and dad were probably as guilty as the next people of giving us breakfast cereal. And when you look at some of the ingredients for breakfast cereals, we know that oatmeal is fantastic. Make your own muesli, Steve, would be amazing. Most breakfast cereals are shit, and I've still got breakfast cereals here, probably out of habit from being brought up that way. But are they the best thing for you to have in the morning? Absolutely not. So, like Steve says, even with the background, ethnicity, where you've been born in the world, the food that you were brought up on, and so on and so forth, because arguably at some point it's almost ingrained, not quite into your DNA, but nearly, Steve.
Yeah.
So let's move on when we
Yeah.
talk about
And then
gardening.
in North America, we have a problem with additives, preservatives, and emulsifiers in our food. Canada and the US. Canada, with the climate in Canada, I know people that live in Canada, like northern Canada, like 4 or 5 hours to the north of the major population cities, which border America, but they live to the north. And they sometimes they're stuck at home in blizzards like the whole week. They can't leave their house, so they are forced to eat a lot of processed junk because they don't have access to any type of fresh food, obviously, 3 or 4 months out of the year because it's so ice cold. So we have a big problem in America with that. And these emulsifiers are just going to fuck up your gut and they're going to fuck up your immune system. So let's get into N2Guard and the inclusion of piperine. And N2Guard has a lot of different ingredients, by the way, to help your gut. And it also has a lot of ingredients as a support supplement to help a lot of things. But the reason we're talking about N2Guard is because it has a big ingredient profile. 40 plus ingredients, Mobster. I think 44 total ingredients. 44, 45 total ingredients. One time I counted them. I think I got 44 ingredients. That's
It
a lot.
includes, and we touched upon this earlier, Steve, parsley leaf, 150 milligrams is in this product. Never mind
That's
the
a good
black pepper
point.
extracts. Yep.
And the piperine is 5 milligrams per serving. So why did they add the parsley leaf and the piperine? Now they do have benefits when it comes to other health benefits, but the main reason why is to help the absorption of all these ingredients. So if you're using a support supplement with a lot of ingredients like N2Guard and you don't see that parsley leaf and piperine added, then just dump it. It's not even worth it. Or get your money back, dispute it with your credit card company, whatever you have to do, because that's a bunch of bullshit. Because you're not going to be able to absorb that shit if you don't have that addition. So that's why N2Guard is so special because they actually, when they put N2Guard together, they knew what they were doing. And they had a method to the madness of putting it together. They didn't just decide, hey, let me just put a bunch of these ingredients together and sell it and it actually works. This is why N2Guard has literally a 99% rate of return. Meaning, if you buy N2Guard, there's a 99% chance you're going to buy another bottle and another bottle and another bottle. So 99% of the customers come back to buy more N2Guard because they notice, wow, it works. They see their blood work, they see their blood pressure, they see their numbers, their liver numbers, their kidney numbers get better. So they know it works. And a big reason why it works is because they were smart enough to add the piperine and the parsley leaf and to make it actually get absorbed by the body and not spit out by the body. Mobster, talk about that.
One of the things that I've discussed on shows when we've talked about N2 guard steeds is that the whole, and this also comes from my limited, in this particular aspect, experience in the supplement field with my supplement company, and that's formulation. And when we've actually done specific comparisons between products that are supposed to do the same job as N2 guard, and I think the next best product, which there was two that were made to a price point. Neither one of them had more than, I believe, 12 ingredients. So that was number one. Number two, we actually talked to someone and on the forum, Steve, back in the day, that used to be involved in, I believe, actually, including with Need to Build Muscle, in helping assist with the idea of putting together products and creating formulations. So they understood, as we understand, in more general terms, they were perhaps more expert in that particular area, that you needed to have certain ratios of certain ingredients, meaning you could have a lot of one but a little bit of the other. If they were both the same ratio, you didn't get as an effective result. For example, I've also discussed this when we talked about N2 guard in the past. There are certain products out there, we've seen this with Tribulus, and I've talked about Tribulus on multiple shows, where I said it needed to be the exact right form of that plant, ideally from the same source that was used in the tests, that were in the studies to prove that Tribulus was such a great ingredient. And it needed to come from the same part of the world. And it even made a difference what time of year that product, that leaf, that the ingredient was harvested. So, for example, and I talked about this with N2 guard, there are times of year that some of the ingredients are not available. There are times where, for whatever reason, that ingredient is in great demand for another reason in another product. It doesn't even have to be an organ protector like N2 guard. And it becomes incredibly difficult, or the price goes crazy for a brief period of time. There are times, as I've just said, when it's only available, ingredients are only available at certain times of year. So there has to be in season. And sometimes, listeners, you get a big harvest and sometimes you don't. So that's quite simple. And again, the quality can vary enormously. The Tribulus is a good example again. Even if you had the leaf or the extract from the plant, there was always grades from low grade to high grade, and high grade was naturally that much more expensive. We've also seen, and again this applies to N2 guard, and it will say this for certain ingredients, where the product is standardized, meaning it has a minimum percentage of the part of that leaf or that stem or that flower. The ingredient is at least 19%. That ingredient is at least 20% of that stem, of that flower, of that leaf as an extract. So you can, for example, Steve, and you can use this as a suggestion, you can have certain ingredients available as oils, certain ingredients available as powders. There are plants where the stem can be used for one thing, the leaf for something else, the seed or the fruit for something else. And there are even parts of plants, Steve, where some plants are poisonous and you should never eat them. I'm thinking off the top of my head, I think celery leaf or something like that. And yet the actual stem, the fibrous thing that we chop up and add to salads, is perfectly fine. So once you starting to get into the understanding, you go, okay, what part of that plant or that ingredient is the best part for us to use? Does it come to a certain level or certain standard? Does it have as an absolute minimum the milligram dosage that we're talking about? And that's without getting into, as I said a little bit earlier on, the ratios. You could, for example, and we've used this analogy in the past, Steve, there are literally, I've used it, the example I've used is Lou Ferrigno in Pumping Iron. I think he's 19 or 20 in the video. And he's standing in front of the fireplace, I assume in his bedroom, somewhere in New York, Steve. And he has 20 supplements lined up on the shelf. Steve's even talked about the hundreds of dollars that he used to spend in GNC back in the day buying this supplement and that supplement and so on and so forth. And the argument become at some point, As Steve's already said, was I getting an effective dose? Was this supplement negating the effect of that supplement? Did I really need to have 15 or 20 supplements on the shelf? And it comes down to silly little things like taking one supplement might cancel out the effects of another one. If you took a little bit too much, it might cancel it. If you took just enough, it was perfect, and so on. So, for example, there are a couple of ingredients in Nintuguard, Steve, where on their own, you can find companies that produce products with a significant amount in. And you might even say, Mobster Steve, it's actually slightly higher dose than this product. Why don't you recommend it? So that's because of the other 43 ingredients in N2Guard and how if they dose them slightly slower, slightly lower, but include that black pepper extract, but include that parsley leaf, we're boosting the effects to a better ratio, to more available. And then because we have those other 43 ingredients, the combined effect of all 43 altogether, what they call the synergistic effect, it becomes that much greater, as you understand it, Steve. So talk a little bit about the whole, if we had to buy these individual products, we'd have 44, Steve, fucking tubs, or at least 10 or 15 tubs on our shelves. Talk about that kind of background
Yeah.
and also how Needtobuildmuscle put these products together.
Yeah. And it wasn't at GNC, it was actually a local supplement shop I used to go to back when I was competing in endurance sports. And I was having a hard time recovering, endurance training, very hard when training for triathlons and long distance running. The recovery was always a challenge. I was trying to do everything I could. I was bathing in different herbs and all kinds of and oils and stuff just to get a edge up on my recovery. It was very, very tough, man. So I would go into the supplement shop and I buy like 8, 9, 10 different supplements to do it. So N2Guard has it all in it, and they make sure that it gets absorbed as well. So N2Guard was created by a company called N2BM, and the quick story behind N2BM, about 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago, an army cook who really was into putting things together, and he loved mixing stuff with his cooking, and he decided to get into the business of supplements. And he got in the business with a first generation immigrant from South America. And they only had a few $1,000s to get this off the ground, but they wanted to design products that were beneficial for serious steroid users, serious athletes who wanted to buy specific products that actually worked and weren't just cookie cutter products. So that's a good thing about what N2BM did. They're not like one of these companies, they just resell a bunch of cookie cutter, protein powders and vitamins and creatine and all this other stuff that these other companies do, pre-workouts and all this other shit. They wanted to come up with these unique supplements that, were put together properly. And one of the things they put together was N2Guard. And N2Guard, the formula has been changed over time and has gotten better and improved over time. One of the things that they changed maybe 12 years ago was they started adding Tutka to the formula. And Tutka is world renowned as one of the best supplements out there for your organ health. And they have every ingredient you could possibly need. And they add the piperine and they add the parsley leaf to make sure that it gets absorbed properly as well. So when you're on cycle, when you're off cycle, it doesn't matter. It's just a great product. And this is a perfect example of using the piperin to your advantage. Without the piperin in the formula, it would not be absorbed as well as it should be. So it was a very smart thing that they did to add in. It just shows you that they know what they're doing. They read the studies, they read the science, and they are able to produce a product that can actually work. So Mobster touched upon that. We have another
Yeah,
minute or two, and then take
yeah.
us to the disclaimer. Yeah.
I'm just thinking here, Steve, as you said, they haven't rested on their laurels. They've made sure that when an ingredient came along that become recognized for its organ boosting, liver and kidney specific health benefits, they made sure to include it. I think off the top of my head, Steve, and again, I might be misquoting even myself, I believe the formulation's changed a couple of times, and each time there's been an improvement. It's been a step forward. You wait till something becomes available that wasn't perhaps known about. You look at it. Is it effective? Does the science, does the data, do the studies, does the peer-reviewed research back it up? And you go, is it worth adding to the formula? If we add it to the formula Do we need to change the ratios? Not sitting on your laurels. People sometimes complain, Steve, about the value. I'll just say to what I said earlier on, Steve. You'd be probably looking, even just on the products that we compared it with, you'd have to take the best one I can think of. And again, I'm not going to give them a name on this show. You'd have to take 2 or 3 times what they were offering for their product to get even close to what N2 Guard offers. And again, one of the things I like to do with these things, and no doubt sometimes the listeners might go, oh, Bob, so you're making us do some work. Look, sometimes just pick 3 or 4 of the more significant ingredients and do 5 minutes of research on each of those ingredients. 20 minutes out of your day. Is Mobs and Stevesmi talking shit? Can I find proof that they're talking rubbish? Find 3, 4, 5 of these ingredients, spend a little bit of your time, and see if we're right about the formula, the form that the ingredient comes in. Is it the right level for standardization? Is it the right part of the plant? When we're talking about plant-based ingredients, does the research, does the data show that these ingredients that Steve and Mobster have talked about are as effective as we say when we're talking about protecting your organs, whether that's brain, heart, lungs, stomach, and specifically liver and kidneys when it comes to taking steroids, because we are well aware, obviously, of the effects and side effects specifically of steroid use. And as an example, Steve, we've done this a few times with both their testosterone boosting products and their organ protecting product in the form of N2 Guard. You can come onto the forums and you can look at tests of people, and I'm thinking about N2 Guard specifically, Steve, where their blood test post-cycle, before they use N2 Guard, and then they've done another cycle using N2 Guard at the same time and seen better values appear in those blood tests. And that isn't bullshit. You can come and look for that yourself. So look, guys, when we talk about companies like Needtobuildmuscle, when we talk about these ingredients, we want you to be able to disprove almost the information that we give you, because you can go away and double check what we've just said. You can look at the black pepper extract, you can look at the grapefruit extract, you can see what the science is out there, such as it is, and how it would benefit specifically in this example, boosting the availability or bioavailability, the slowing down of the metabolizing of certain supplements, so you get the most bang for your buck, so you get the best benefits that extract, that plant, that ingredient is offering you. Let us know your thoughts as always. Talk to us in the comments. If you like what we do, share it. Let us know if you think we're wrong. Please note, as always, we are not doctors and the opinions are ours. It is our view based on our experience and views on the topic. A podcast of informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment apply.